And we're running.
And now we're running, and now we're live.
We are. Welcome to The Impact Narrative, episode...
Season 2.
Season 2, episode...
Season 2.
Right, okay. You've forgotten.
I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Season 2, episode something.
5. 5, Roz tells us.
5, excellent.
That's brilliant.
Season 2, episode 5.
And of course, we have to explain what it is. It's where we discuss things of common interest. There is general interest. Some of them are not of any interest, like your jigsaw puzzle.
That has a great deal of intellectual merit and interest.
Well,
We'll maybe get onto that later on.
yeah.
But we discuss news stories, we discuss topical events, we discuss what's going on in the world.
And what's going on in the world this week, Simon?
Nothing particularly cheery, Mark.
No, you amaze me. So, should I prompt... we'll have to say who we are. His name is Simon Mabon.
And his name is Mark Garnett.
That's correct.
Collectively we are...
We are The Impact Narrative.
Oh, excellent. That's
Yeah.
almost as if we've worked on it.
Well,
Spent hours this morning instead of doing PhD supervisions. Oh no, sorry, it was the other way
lectures.
around.
Nothing could be quite so amateurish without hours of preparation. Preparation.
Indeed.
See,
Preparation.
Yeah. So,
It's a
Simon...
good job you've not just been lecturing, Mark, isn't it?
well, I'm all talked out.
What was today on?
Britain and the World between 1992 and 2007, which I prefaced by
interesting.
alluding to current goings-on in the United Arab Emirates. And I was hoping that I could pick your enormous planet-sized brain on this situation, because it seems to me to have implications for Britain, but I think you would probably want to be talking about the implications more generally for the region, as well as Britain.
I'm more concerned with the implications for a certain Matthew Hedges.
Right, yeah.
Be damned with the region, be damned with the implications for Britain. I think we need to focus more on the abhorrent treatment of a PhD student from Durham University, of course one of our rivals, but nonetheless we'll put aside those differences. This is a PhD student who's gone out to Abu Dhabi, gone out to the United Arab Emirates to do research, and has done that research in accordance with Durham's ethical research policies. He's gone through all of the necessary channels, he's gone through all the ethical procedures that all universities have to have now.
Yeah.
He's gone through all of those things. He's gone through all of the risk assessments that all universities have to have. He's done all of that. He's ticked every box. And he's still been detained for months in pretty shocking conditions. And then yesterday, on the day that we are recording, this is Thursday, the 22nd. Yesterday he was given a life sentence for spying. And this is someone who was treated pretty badly, subjected to solitary confinement, who was forced to read and sign a document in Arabic. As someone who doesn't speak any Arabic, doesn't read Arabic, turned out that it was a confession, and now obviously he's stuck in an Emirati jail.
And
It's a pretty worrying time.
well, obviously one's very deepest sympathies go out to Mr. Hedges, but one would hope in a situation like this that there would be some kind of solution to it, and
One would hope.
The British government would get involved. However, from what you've just told me, if somebody feels that they have no alternative but to sign a document that they can't read, it would seem that if you presented with a document like that, then usually what you might do is to say, I would like to have consular support, I would like to have legal support arranged by my government, and it doesn't seem like that happened.
No, and it also transpires that his sentencing was over in 5 minutes without his lawyer present. So he's been held since May. Now, there are obviously all kinds of concerns about due process here, all kinds of issues about the legality of it, about the ethics of what he's done, of course, but about the processes, the legal, political, judicial processes that have meant that Mr. Hedges has been detained and imprisoned in the Emirates. Now, Mark, I'm curious to know, your lecture today was prefaced with this discussion. How were you linking it? What was the...
Well, I ventured the opinion that maybe 20, 30 years ago, if a British national had actually been engaged in activities which could be described as espionage, if that person was caught, then the incident almost certainly would have been dealt with diplomatically, and the person probably would have been expelled, and there would be a dressing down for the British ambassador or something to that effect, but there would be no question of the person being imprisoned in Abu Dhabi. And what's happened here is the complete reverse, that somebody who's innocent has been sentenced to life imprisonment. And I was, as I say, I'm sorry if my interest in this is seems to downgrade the human factor. Of course it doesn't, but my immediate thought is, why on earth Britain has got itself into the kind of low repute in the region, and perhaps more widely, that far from being in a position to get culprits off the hook, it now isn't in a position to help innocent people. That was my question, and it just seems to be an absolutely stark illustration of Britain's declining influence.
Sure, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we're hearing rumours, rhetoric, musings coming out of London from Mr. Hunt and Mrs. May about the need to do something, but I fear that the inability to even get this thing resolved before it going to trial suggests a great deal about Britain's role in the world.
Yeah.
And it's declined. Let's not forget, the Emirates is supposedly one of the UK's key regional allies, a key strategic partner in the Middle East. I'm just reading here comments from my old PhD supervisor, Clive Jones, who is Matt Hedges' supervisor at Durham. He was on the Today programme, and he's been quite explicit in terms of what Hedges was doing. I'll quote, "There was nothing clandestine or covert in any of the material he'd been using in his thesis. He went to the United Arab Emirates to conduct a series of interviews to help flesh out some of the theories and some of the empirical evidence he had actually collected. If we had any inkling that Matt was in any sense, shape or form was going to be in danger, then of course we would not have agreed to let him go. Matt was no stranger to the United Arab Emirates. He lived there on and off since the age of 9. He knew many people he was going out to interview, so again, it's utterly bizarre and indeed perverse and indeed a miscarriage of justice that this has befallen him." So incredibly strong words there from Clive, who is incredibly well versed in this type of thing.
But he isn't, because the family is criticising the British government and the Foreign Office in particular.
Yes.
But nothing there implies such criticism. But I guess it's somewhere in the background of what he's saying.
I think there's a couple of things at play. There's obviously the way in which this has been handled in Abu Dhabi, the way in which someone who's gone out to do research in a place that he's previously lived, that he was there, he'd reached out, he'd agreed to talk to people, obviously officials. He was working on a thesis looking at civil-military relations in the UAE, so obviously key officials would have been involved in being interviewed, so there's obviously some tacit approval there. But then there's a criticism of the way in which the British government has handled, or indeed not handled, this. I think that's entirely accurate with what you're saying here, that either there's an unwillingness or an inability to actually affect any real change.
But yes, I mean, on the face of it, one could immediately start thinking, in the wake of Brexit, we have trading relations with the United Arab Emirates, which we have a trade surplus with the United Arab Emirates. They're good customers of ours, and it could be thought that the regime might say, well, because of Brexit, Britain's going to need us more than ever before, and countries like us, and that means that we can start treating them in a far more cavalier fashion. But that still doesn't explain why on earth. I mean, there must be some internal domestic, but maybe he spoke to the wrong people. Maybe he's trespassing on the kind of territory which would be relevant, particularly in Egypt, the relationship between the military and the people or whatever. But even so, asking the wrong questions when you're a citizen of a friendly nation should be a reason for somebody to tap you on the shoulder and say, actually, you're not wanted here, could you please leave? Mm-hmm. It just seems so extraordinary that, again, one can only presume that there is somewhere in it, it's not necessarily an anti-British agenda, but certainly a contempt for Britain.
It sounds like it, certainly sounds like it. And I think there's going to be serious repercussions here. We had a conversation with one of our students this morning, and we were obviously incredibly concerned about his
absolutely.
going out to a part of the region to do research, and there's obviously going to be strict calls for stopping any PhD students from going out to the Emirates.
Oh, the Emirates start off with, but also to British tourists.
Well,
I mean, you know, and you've got all the other implications of Dubai as the great hub of transport. And
I've lost count of the number of times I've transited through both Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
But as an intellectual community, there's a burgeoning interest in the Gulf.
Yeah.
For a range of reasons: security, economic, religious, logistical, and all of that has been called into question because of the safety of those who want to go out and do research there.
Yeah.
This is previously considered to be one of the safer, one of the more stable Gulf monarchies.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing how a British student from a reputable university is being treated. I mean,
but this is perhaps where the stability comes from, that anyone who even asks awkward questions will confine themselves, even if they should have diplomatic protection to some extent, they're incarcerated for life.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing we should just quickly touch on, Mark, is the extent to which Gulf states are financing British academic institutions. And this isn't just a case of a small state in the Gulf wanting to restrict its intellectual inquiry, let's say. There's something bigger at play, or something somewhat more complex at play, because the Emirates, as well as Kuwait, are sponsoring a great number of highly prestigious British universities, pumping great amounts of money into those institutions, including Durham. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Emirates have put money into Durham, but I know that Durham has received money from the Gulf. But so has the LSE, so has Cambridge, and a number of others. They have received money from these states. And so there are calls from some circles, calls for some kind of boycott, some kind of...
but again, that's where the self-interest of these institutions is going to come into play. And in the end, I mean, this is all too redolent to me of the early 1980s and the Death of the Princess episode. I mean, it's like the same thing writ hideously large, but that because of the economic importance of Saudi Arabia, the British Foreign Secretary humbled himself and criticised British documentary makers for looking beneath the surface of Saudi society. And you know, it was as if we were ashamed. The British apologised for actually wanting to uncover nefarious practices which really were going on, and I do wonder, in the end, Brexit comes into absolutely everything, but we're going to have to be doing more of this in the future, because when we're looking for trading,
this, you mean
more of the grovelling to
and the sacrificing
of individuals on the altar of economic self-interest.
Well, I was going to say of normative values, but I feared that normative sacrifice includs individuals.
Yeah, oh, quite, absolutely.
And that's a devastating cost, Mark.
Well, it is, but we've been prepared to pay it for a very long time. As I say, in regards to Saudi Arabia, as soon as the Death of the Princess episode happened, the Saudi regime knew that Britain would never, the British government would always step in to prevent people from trying to uncover the truth about Saudi Arabia. So that price has been paid an awful long time ago, and you might look at other costs incurred in other relationships we have across the world, in which Britain has refrained from doing what a power of any significance would do because it's frightened of losing lucrative contracts, etc. And, of course, we are saying all this in the wake of Mr. Trump's interesting and very plain spoken, basically saying what happened to Mr. Khashoggi was despicable, not really pulling any punches from that, but then saying maybe the Crown Prince wasn't involved or whatever, I'm not sure, and we're still not proven, of course, but then saying, well, we get dollops of dosh from them, and so let's go easy. And to be honest, this is a real test of character for the fate of academics doesn't often hit the headlines, but it's on the front page of virtually every national newspaper. And for Theresa May at the current time, I think this is another challenge that she could very much do without.
Yeah, certainly. There are going to be serious repercussions for a great many of us intellectuals, as academics, people who are engaging in the study of this part of the world. This is not going to go away anytime soon, nor should it.
No, and all sorts of implications. I mean, even a thing that I'm very interested in, although this isn't Dubai, but the racing industry depends so much on the wealth of people from that. And this is a big employer, the racing industry, and it could have a devastating blow. If we're going to apply sanctions, begin to look unfriendly towards the United Arab Emirates, who knows, because these people can easily take their money out of Britain. And that is the point, that in the end, because this country is no longer a manufacturing power of any significance, it is basically kept afloat on finance, and the finance comes from countries who, in return, can basically do what they like without fear of chastisement from Britain. And I think, for a debate about Britain's role in the world, which was implied in Brexit, and all these cliches about the golden future, it's a golden future of grovelling to tyrannical regimes, and that might be unavoidable. But it's ridiculous to talk about our new strength in the world when these developments are going to make it less likely that we can have anything like a face of integrity in international relations.
Of course. We've not even talked about Manchester City. We've not talked about the extent to which the City of London is...
I like horse racing more than football. I'm a Newcastle United fan. So,
well, that's why.
Is this something to the... Is this the Emirates Stadium?
It is.
Yeah, funny that. So maybe some good will come of this.
Well, perhaps, but...
Start boycotting Arsenal. I certainly have not bought a season ticket this year.
Me either.
Right. Oh well, you see, the boycott begins, and that is the other thing. I think this is the kind of thing that people might wonder about taking their own sanctions against the United Arab Emirates, and you can't stop buying their oil, but you can certainly what they're trying to do. This is a bizarre thing. They're trying to use their money to build up a soft power profile, hence the investment in universities, and they've just destroyed that at a stroke. And it is a possibility that the government might be able to take Weasley, just a slap on the wrist type of thing, and try to do things behind the scenes. If they haven't managed to do so far, I can't see. They certainly can't do it without. They can't save any face. It's similar to the mess that Mr. Johnson got himself into in terms of Iran. There's no good answer for the British government, but it could be that people might start wondering how they could take their own sanctions. Certainly, holiday making in that area. I would have hoped that people are going to think more than twice about doing that. And that is, again, they don't need the money, but they do need the positive international image.
Mark, we've been sort of skirting around an issue, and I think the second part of the show, we need to touch on Brexit a bit more. Because since we last spoke...
A lot has happened since we last spoke.
A lot has happened. There's been a deal.
Yeah, there's been a deal. Well, what do you want me to say? I mean, this is just the most... It would take 5 hours.
Well, I should just say, before the deal was completed, I was in Parliament.
Oh, of course, right. It's your fault.
And there's the obligatory weekly yawn.
It's the word Brexit, isn't it? It's a trigger, yawn trigger. Simon never sleeps.
Launching the first
only during my lectures
report.
Yeah.
That's why I come along every week. It's a good chance to get 75
40
minutes.
winks.
We launched the first SEPAD report.
And it was all happening.
It was all happening. Off. We were there. We were down the corridor from Brexit.
Central.
Indeed.
Right. Fantastic.
But anyway,
touched by anarchy and chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
this time last week then, or whenever you were, this time last week, it looked like Theresa May was gone by the weekend, and there was a debate in which she made a statement setting out her case perfectly well, no coughs or hesitations or repetitions, a perfectly adequate statement of the facts, and then was just bombarded with hostile questions for more than an hour. She was at bay, and it did look like she couldn't survive, and people started talking about leadership challenge, all that sort of thing. The parliamentary arithmetic looked terrible. It still looks terrible. And then she did what prime ministers can do, but very few of them have got the sheer pig-headedness of Mrs. May. She used the media. She made gave a press conference, brilliant handle. People still think she's a bit robotic. I thought she was brilliant. She handled the questions with a touch of humour, which is a little bit unusual,
surprising.
but complete and utter defiance. And in the end, what she's saying is, this is the only compromise deal on offer. And if you unpick it, if you look behind it, she started as a very lukewarm Remainer. When she was handed the Brexit chalice, she thought, right, I'm going to go with this because I'm going to get free of the European Court of Justice. I'm going to get free of all these terrible migration figures. In other words, there is a big silver lining in Brexit. So I'm going to say things like, the ridiculous Brexit means Brexit. She said, right, well, the people have decided. I'm not that bothered, to be honest. I'm quite happy to go along with Brexit. And she, with that pragmatic outlook and basically certain real goals to get out of Brexit, hasn't been able to produce anything more than a compromise on the EU's terms, which it is at the moment. The withdrawal thing is definitely a compromise on the EU's terms. What comes out in the end, and this is why the foaming Brexiteers, this show has no opinion on this at all, apart from perhaps saying that certain people have behaved in a pathetic fashion.
And others foam.
The foamers, they have chosen to find fault with it because they don't want to compromise.
Sure.
And in particular, the DUP, and this is Mrs. May's fault, she should have said, I'm going to... I obviously want my party to remain in office. It's in the national interest to do so, but it's not in the national interest to be dependent on the Democratic Unionist Party for all sorts of reasons. And now she's being paid back handsomely by them, because in the end, the backstop agreement is not going to come into operation. It is a backstop. It's if everything else fails, but they're going to make sure other things don't fail. So the idea that Northern Ireland is going to be treated different from the rest of the United Kingdom is theoretical rather than real.
Yeah.
And yet the DUP, because they do what they always do, is try to get more and more money out of the British government. They've decided, these are people who are deeply unappealing from the point of view of democratic politics. I mean, they've got democratic in their title, but what they do is basically bully people they don't deal, they bluster.
Right,
They've always done this. Ian Paisley, who became saw the light in the end, but he started off by blustering and talking nonsense, and trying to get his way by stirring up fears in his community, and then saying to the government, the only way to get round these fears is for you to do exactly what I'm telling you. Here's my shopping list. I mean, this isn't real. This is the politics of small town America or whatever. It perhaps is Donald Trump's politics. But anyway, leave that aside. So Mrs. May has so far won because she's seen off the foamers.
So what's
but not the
happened with
DUP,
the,
and nothing good's going to come of that.
Well, yeah, that's maybe for another conversation. But what happened with all the myriad people who wrote letters to the 1922 committee?
Well, the myriad was about 26 or something.
Right, so it wasn't the...
And you see, in the end, the Conservative Party is dedicated to survival, self-preservation, winning elections, and this is the hilarious thing about this, which isn't hilarious if you're a Conservative. Mrs. May will not fight the next general election unless something bizarre happens. So you've got somebody who is an electoral liability who... because the Brexiteers have overplayed their hand, they actually have made it more likely she might survive to lead. And so what you've got is a mass of the Conservative Party saying, let's get this blooming compromise through, because the alternatives are horrible. General election, horrible.
Yep.
Second referendum, horrible. No deal Brexit, probably horrible. That sort of thing. So we're stuck with Mrs May. Ken Clarke very wisely said she's doomed to lead because there just is no other solution.
He does have a way with words, doesn't he?
He does, but well, he was the one who said a bloody stubborn woman or whatever he called her, which is absolutely true. But the party, which is wedded to the idea of self-preservation, is now choosing somebody who is seen as an electoral liability as their means of self-preservation, and so they're going to have to hope that after Brexit she'll be persuaded to take a retirement somewhere.
Right.
But that'll be in April, I should think.
Right.
And in the meantime, I mean, but the trouble is that we can't get till April because we've got the parliamentary vote on the withdrawal bill, and that's going to. There's no deal. There is no way that anything is going to get through the House of Commons because customs union and single market isn't going to get through the House of Commons. The compromise isn't going to get through the House of Commons. No deal isn't going to get through the House of Commons. And so somehow the opposition parties are going to have to get together and, I don't know, delay. I don't know, but they're probably going to have to go to see Mrs May and say we can withdraw our Article 50.
You think that's where this is going?
I honestly, I'm just thinking of all the possibilities. None of them look possible.
Right. What's interesting
impossible
for that is
possibilities.
There was a legal effort to go to, was it the European Court, about withdrawing Article 50?
Right. Well, I mean, but
and the UK, the British Supreme Court said, we are not going to stop this from going forward.
Well, but they're not going to do it. But
Exactly,
Theresa May can do it. Parliament can do it. I mean, she was the one who put in. The Parliament agreed that the thing would be triggered, and you can just untrigger it. And you know, this is where things could really get very, very unpleasant because the cliff edge Brexiteers are. They've got a mixture of on the one hand, they've all lost their heads because of the referendum. They didn't expect to win, and so they're just walking around like Jacob Rees-Mogg as if they own the place already, and they're making dreadful mistakes because of their hubris or what have you. And that is now making them furious. And so Treason May, they all spout this rubbish on their websites. That she somehow, because she has batted for Britain, and that's what the public realise, her opinion poll ratings have risen appreciably, but the parliamentarians are not rational on this, and they see anything short of no deal Brexit as a sellout of Britain. Unbelievable. Her version of the national interest is the one that people will consider. There was the funniest thing I've heard in ages, was a little shaft of humour in all this. Liam Fox made a speech the other day when he said, sometimes you can't do what you want to do, you have to act in the national interest, which implies that what he wants to do isn't in the national interest.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And of course the Brexiteers in the cabinet are all overplaying their hands, and Gove and all the rest of it. It's really, and they're hating each other more. The ones that stay in the cabinet hate the ones that are outside, and vice versa. It is horrendous. It's worse than I could have imagined. Really horrible.
Okay, I have two quick things. One, have you ever seen a period in British politics quite this bad?
Well, no, I was asked about this. William Hague said the other day that this is the worst in his lifetime. It is the worst. If you look at all the angles, we had terrible problem. We had problems in the 80s. We had problems in the 70s. You could talk about Suez. Suez was handled really smoothly. Anthony Eden was persuaded to go on and extended. There was lots of demonstrations, whatever. The only parallel is 1940 and the fall of the Chamberlain government. But then there was a shared sense of an aim at the end of it. This time there isn't. Then the parties were far less split than the multiple splits everywhere. So you've got to say that this is unparalleled in British history.
Wow.
In its complexity and its capacity for something stupid to emerge out of it. What happened with Chamberlain? Something constructive was going to come out of it. What happened with Suez? Something dubious, repairing bridges with America. This is where all the options look to be bad.
Yeah. Wow.
Even a second referendum, because of course it'll be horrible.
It will. The other thing that I was just going to say quickly, because we are rapidly out of time, and is there something on the desk that you wanted to mention?
What, Jigsaw of the Week?
No, well, yes.
My mug?
The other thing is, it seems to be a recurrent theme across this episode, the idea of the national interest and figuring out misunderstanding the national interest and the devastating consequences of getting that wrong.
Getting it wrong. Well, this has happened so often, and as I was saying in my lecture not so very long ago, the trouble is that all of the people who've been in charge of Britain's foreign policy, except for perhaps Ted Heath, although he was with Alec Douglas-Home, it was a partnership, but prime ministers have tended to have vested interest in presenting a view of the world on which you cannot base a realistic foreign policy, because it is still based on this idea of Britain retaining global status. As long as that remains part of the mindset of British politicians, we're not going to get rational decision making. And it's no disgrace to say we're a highly significant force in the world, and that our future might lie more in soft power, all these kind of things. That Britain will still matter, but if you're still making people think that nothing has changed, that we are still the nation, the one that the football fans sing, 2 world wars, 1 World Cup and all that sort of thing, while that mentality is alive and kicking in political circles, then we really are going to keep making terrible mistakes.
Well, Mark, I think on that pretty depressing note, we're out of time. But
yeah, not good. Somber.
Very, very somber. I feel somewhat churlish to perhaps talk about doing the usual things that one should do.
Oh right, yeah. What? Subscribe if you want to hear more somber stuff. We've got loads more where this came from.
Yeah.
We got started.
Humour.
Yeah. Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, eBay. Amazon,
Etsy.
Other websites are available.
Etsy,
probably. These are all websites, and some of them you can access us on. And so, I wish you good luck doing it. But so yeah, subscribe, like,
share,
yeah, that kind of thing.
And
share,
until
American
next time.
pop singer of some vintage.
Dubious vintage.
Excellent. Anyway, so, let's just hope next time we all meet, we'll have something a bit more positive to talk about.
Let's hope. See you later, Mark.
Yep.